The Old Testament, or Hebrew Bible, is a collection of books with an astonishing amount of violence. In the earliest chapters of Genesis, with only 4 people running around, you get the first murder. From there, you find a litany of wars, assassinations, executions, rapes, genocide, mutilation, and on, committed by good guys and bad guys, good women and bad women, Satan and God himself. These texts are really dark. However, in terms of sheer volume of death, no story surpasses the Great Flood. Nearly all of terrestrial life is just wiped out. What's really strange to me is how this is the story we teach our kids when they're little. We paint murals on their bedroom walls. We give them Fisher-Price toys to play with. We even teach them songs to sing. Who built the ark? Noah, Noah. Who killed everyone else? Yahweh, Yahweh. Okay, that second part isn't in the original, but still, it's weird that this is the Bible story so many kids learn first. The ubiquity of violence in these scriptures can be disturbing to many readers. And to be sure, there is a lot that is indeed quite disturbing. At the same time, there's an honesty to all of it. This is real life. The history of human beings has been a story of extreme violence. And people living comfy lives, like me, need to remember that the context we find ourselves in here in the United States in the 21st century is immeasurably distant from the reality that most people have lived. If these scriptures were written to address the most serious challenges that human beings face, which I believe they were, it's not surprising that so much has dealt with extreme violence. So, what are we to make of this story of Noah? Why was it written? What is it that I'm supposed to take away from it? Some people suggest that it's simply talking about a real flood that real people experienced. There is some evidence of a major flood in ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, around 2900 BCE, which could explain it. There's also the possibility that at some point around 5600 BCE, the waters of the Mediterranean suddenly broke through the Bosporus and rapidly filled what became the Black Sea. Accounts of a flood of that magnitude would surely have survived in oral traditions, until written down in works like Genesis and the Epic of Gilgamesh. So, okay, maybe. Others have pointed out that the great flood stories can be found all around the world, from Greece to China to the Americas. Perhaps they're part of humanity's collective unconscious, a primal archetype, a la Carl Jung. It's a motif that makes its way into many civilizations' narrative histories because there's power in stories of a great flood that speaks to something deep within all of us. Okay, maybe. But in addition to these possibilities, allow me to suggest another meaning of the story of Noah's flood. A reading that conveys a very real truth, regardless of what you think about the historicity of the flood. Genesis tells us that God looked at the world and was distraught at what he saw. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humans was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. When I was young, I imagined lots of people running around being immoral. They were getting drunk and cursing, staying up late and being loud when Noah and his family were trying to sleep. They were probably eating pork, picking up hookers, and getting into fistfights. That's how a kid thinks about such things. I see it a bit differently now. The 6th chapter continues, "Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw that the earth was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. And God was disgusted. For the earth is filled with violence because of them, and now I am going to destroy them along with the earth." The earth was filled with violence. The slaughter of innocents in war. Those with power murdering their weaker neighbors to seize their homes and wives and possessions. Physical and sexual abuse of children. Slavery, torture, every day. Nothing to indicate tomorrow would be any better. That's what it means to say the earth was filled with violence. Am I being overly dramatic? Exaggerating for effect? Follow the news. Consider our world today. Wars in Ukraine, the DRC, Sudan, Gaza, Iran. More slavery today than at any point in history. online sexual exploitation of children, corrupt police and judges in many countries ensuring that the rich and powerful never face justice for evil acts, murders in our own neighborhoods. And this is within our world, blessed with greater justice systems and law enforcement than our ancestors could have dreamed of. And in addition to all those carrying out violence themselves, are those with the ability to do something about it who do nothing at all. If you're like me, sometimes you look at the world with all of the suffering it engenders and wonder if it deserves to continue. Let's be less general and a little more specific. There are times when we have to face some particularly cruel act of injustice. Perhaps we were the victim, or maybe it's someone else that we care about. What happened was wrong, seriously wrong, and it was carried out by a person of their own free will, for selfish reasons, devoid of any concern for the victim of their act of inhumanity. And what do people do? We shout at the heavens that we want justice. This cannot stand. We want God to act as judge and hand out the punishment they deserve. We want the perpetrators to pay the price for their deeds. But what happens here in the real world? All too often, nothing at all. One of the most recurring themes in the Old Testament is Theodicy. Why do terrible things happen in this world to people who don't deserve it? If God is all powerful, he could do something about it, and if he's all loving, he would want to. Related to that is the question we ask here. If God is just and loves justice, then why do the guilty so often benefit from their misdeeds? We want to see justice. If theodicy is a prevalent theme in the Old Testament, so also is the lofty standard of God's ethics. Living in accord with the standards of God is not simply about being nice. It's not a silver rule kind of ethics where you just don't harm others. The moral teachings throughout the Bible are not simply to avoid murder, adultery, and stealing. They demand much more. Learn to do right, seek justice, encourage the oppressed, defend the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned, lighten the burden of those who work for you, let the oppressed go free, and remove the chains that bind people. Open your hand wide to your brother, to the needy and to the poor. Help those who have been robbed, rescue them from their oppressors. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. God requires you and me to go out and do the difficult and dangerous work of bringing justice to the oppressed. But do we do it? When we call to God and demand justice, do we really want it? Not just for that bad guy over there, but do we really want justice? If so, why do we think we would be spared? We all read the flood story and relate to Noah. We imagine ourselves safely on his boat. But Noah was the only righteous person God found in the whole world. And we identify with him. Can you imagine anything more prideful, more self-righteous, more comical? We think we want God to appear and carry out justice. Well, the author of the story says, okay, here's what that would look like. And by the way, you're not Noah. Are you sure you want justice and not mercy? In the flood story, we find two of the most important themes in the Bible: the struggle to understand why God allows evil, and the moral standards we are called to live by. And so, when you and I shake our fists at heaven and demand to know, God, why don't you bring us justice? We hear the answer in this story. I did that once, and it was horrific. You don't want me to do that again. Besides, do you think you would stand in such a judgment? And what's more, I made a promise not to levy such a punishment ever again. You should be grateful for that promise of mercy. In more familiar language, be careful what you wish for. Noah's flood is far from the cutesy story we share with children. It deals with the problem of evil, the reality of violence, justice, mercy, and the moral goodness that God wants to see from his people. We don't get easy answers to the tough questions. It forces us to struggle with God through narrative. It encourages wrestling with the divine mystery and listening to the call to do what is right on behalf of others. Was there an actual great flood? I don't know. To be honest, I don't really care very much. The truth of this story, like so many in the Bible, is far more profound than a simple question of history. And that's what keeps me returning to its pages. Thank you.